Hello, my friends. Welcome back to Safe Space. Today I have Christian. He's the founder and CEO of Autograph AI. Your voice, your stories forever. We're going to get into how this company was built, the background of Christian, into his sci-fi novel he'll be releasing soon, and even listen to stories about his podcast, The Rabbit Hole Research. Right now, I'm just going to welcome him onto the show, and he's going to tell us a little bit about Autograph AI and how it came to be. Hello, Christian.
Hi, Shan. So good to be here. Um,
So excited as well.
I'm excited. I don't even know where to start. We should start with autograph, you said?
Yeah,
Um,
like let's just tell them what it is first, and then we can maybe backtrack into how it came to be, where you got the idea.
Yeah, of course. So Autograph is a service that aims to, like, our mission is to record and retell the history of humanity in every character's own words. So what we do is we created this character called Walter. He's an AI biographer of sorts, or like a personal historian. And he serves as your chronicler. So he will call you once a week and check in on you, ask you how you're doing. We'll interview you about your life. So starting with your childhood, teenage years, the people in your life, the places in your life, all the good stuff. And apart from being able to see all that data in a web portal, kind of like a Wikipedia for your life, we also create a model of you that sounds like you and speaks like you and has all your memories so that when your kids are going through life, and they're, making a decision or something like that, and they're telling Walter about it. Well, Walter, I may have to move to New York. Walter can say, "Hey, this reminds me of something your grandpa went through. Do you want to talk to him for 15 minutes?" And for the first time in history, you wouldn't just be able to listen to the story of when Grandpa moved to New York, but you would also be able to talk to that, thing, even if Grandpa wasn't around anymore. And not just grandpa, like if you had grandma on the platform, you would be able to hear her side of the story, or the kids' side of the story. And maybe like for two of the kids, it was great to move to New York, but for one, it was really difficult because they had to break up with their first crush or something like that. And so you could actually like start painting a much more robust picture of the stories that made you who you are to make the best decisions to live your most epic life going forward. Um, and it's just a really exciting and weird and science fiction-y thing to do. But for the first time in history, we could actually negotiate terms with our impermanence and really go like, what's the next level after, photos and videos? And it's like, wait a minute, you could actually just talk to the past. And in a weird way, that means that we're talking to the future, which is really exciting.
Well, like growing up with all the stories that you hear about your grandparents, like from somebody else, I think it's, excuse me, I think it's really inspiring to be able to not only have them capture it for you, but hear it in the model of their voice. And I know that might creep some people out, but to me, I think it would just be so nice and reassuring. I still have like voicemails and some videos of my grandma's voice, and I listen to those when I miss her. But when I found this company, I was like, that is such a great way to like interlink generations almost.
I'm so glad you think that. And I agree. I mean, I think there's there's a you can always take it in like the more cynical way and say like, oh, this is an illusion, or this is like a it's not really her. And that's true, of course, like it's not really her, um but also, like, what we do that I think is different is because we take the big, the bird's eye view about life, and we ask grandma about, like, what's your great biggest regret and what's your biggest, like, victory and, like, all these, like, big life questions. What does faith mean to you? What does love mean to you? How do you recover from heartbreak? The kind of stuff that's in there for the model to speak about after, the person passes is new material that rarely comes up naturally, like it's usually bigger, deeper life stuff. Um, and so you don't know when, unexpectedly you achieve a certain milestone and, a certain I'm proud of you may just get you there.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm glad you think that way. I mean, like we certainly tend to think that way. And, for about every Honestly, it's like less than one. There's less than 10% of folks who say that it's creepy at all. 95+% of people say I have a voicemail from my grandma that I keep
Yeah.
because, like, and to think about how crazy that is, because it's like it's probably like some unassuming voicemail, right? It's just like you just want to connect to the voice and to whatever the relationship to that voice. Um and so what we do is we just do that, but also all the untapped wisdom that was there that we didn't have time to ask or we didn't think to ask. Now we can actually safely store, and not just for you, because you may have actually known grandma, but if grandma's like one of those like family institutions, for your kids or their kids to know grandma and to know where they come from, I think is so important in a world that feels, I don't know, lonelier and lonelier, where families feel, like they're having trouble staying connected over time and over distance. And, like, what is a tool that we can create to let families, grow their social capital in the way that other institutions have done?
I like your rebuttal on my devil's advocate. I'm definitely on your side with the technology, but I was explaining I went home for about 5 days before this interview, so I got to see my
Hmm.
grandpa, I got to see all of my
Mm,
family, and immediately when I found the company, I sent the website to my mother-in-law because she's all about preserving everything
mm,
possible. Like,
mm,
she's the one that sends the emails who it's like,
mhm.
"Here's all these questions that you might think of after I die, so I
Uh,
answered them for you." You know, like,
uh-huh.
she's a definite planner, so I was telling, like, my mom and my sister and anybody's ear that I could get about because 'cause I'm like, "I'm getting ready to interview Christian, he's just got this really cool way of seeing the world that I'm excited, but think about it, like, you die, I want your advice, but I also, like, I wanna feel close to you. I wanna feel like your consciousness is still here. Not that I have to
Mhm.
imagine it in my head, but I can just call Walter about it." And my sister was it was like a sci-fi reaction. It's not like she was against it. She was like, "Whoa, like, I didn't even think that that was, like, possible yet. Huh, I wonder what that would be like." And I'm like, "Yeah, can you imagine if we would have done that with grandma?" And then I was thinking about because we did a huge, like, we're huge into, like, our genealogy and figuring
Mm,
out where everything went. So then when I think about this company and the way that you can preserve the memory, I was thinking about how it could even tie into genealogy down the road, where if you
for
go to
sure.
something like ancestry.com, but instead of reading everything about your family, you get to like click on a family member and they're like, I came over here in 1678. And it might not be like their perfect voice, but I was just thinking of how it could even grow down the line to again
Yeah.
link the generations more and make it feel more personal. Like even if you didn't know them in their lifetime, you would still know them. So I mean, the capabilities are vast, but even where it's beginning now, it just hits so close to home for me with the people that I still have here that have inspired me to ask those questions. And,
Hmm.
obviously, yes, I still have my grandma's voicemail and her voice in my head, but it's just it's such a great concept that I think needs to be out there in the world. Like, I'll probably just totally trigger you the whole time about it because 'cause I'm like, "Bravo." And I also wanna commend you for taking, like, the pain of losing someone like that and the interview that you were going to have with her and transforming it into something, like, that is the absolute definition of transmutation, in my opinion. So, I just wanna applaud you for that because it is a beautiful
Cheyenne, you're too kind. You're too kind. No, thank you. And my favorite part about the job is telling people what we do and seeing that reaction. There's like it's a split second thing, but like for a second, people think like, wait a minute, like maybe I had this whole thing, like maybe my whole thing can look different now.
Mhm,
Um, and it's a big hopeful thing, and like it's a little like even if it's just for like the little bit of hope that gets injected into people by hearing
mhm,
about the idea, it's been so rewarding. And then like and actually seeing the usage of our platform and people sharing feedback and like what does it mean to share this stuff for their family, and it's precious stuff. I mean, like it really is. It's so moving to me that um that like upon being faced with something really difficult, that I was able to find, okay, oh, this has to be the thing that I use to connect all the dots that came before. And maybe this is a solved problem. Like we don't need to have this problem anymore. Like I wish I would have asked this question. Like we all have like, you know, we all have the sword of Damocles over our head being like, okay, like what are the things that I'm not doing now that I would really regret if something, unexpected were to happen. Um, and so we're like kind of like this weird insurance for that thing, and like it's just like, wait a minute, like the stories that made you who you are precious, and like we need to preserve them. And life is challenging, like it's not just challenging in the sense that like you have to find time and like share, like you have to coordinate to see someone, but also some of these conversations can be really emotionally difficult, right? Like I don't know, like if there's stories of divorce or the stories of like any kind of big family complication thing, there's always like layers of hurt and trauma that have to be navigated in order to even have the conversation in an earnest way. Um, but with Walter's kind of like a passive, non-judgmental, just like witness to your life who is very discreet. So like, privacy first for everything. So he will just give you the space to feel like the main character in your own life. Um, and it's not just about, like the lives of your loved ones and the people that you want to preserve. We're starting with them because, that's the most urgent thing we need to capture. Um, but the exercise of telling your own story is so helpful for your own well-being. Like you tell your story, and by just telling your story, you're presenting a picture of how much agency do you have? How much is fate in control, or am I in control? Uh, am I a victim? Am I a hero? Am I all these things become really apparent, like in the way that like the words that you use to tell your story, and reflecting that back to our users, and they can actually engage with their story, not just as the protagonist, but also as the author and the editor. Um, I think that is so beautiful because people are like, oh my gosh, like, oh yeah, that is. I have been thinking about it that way, but I don't need to think about it that way. Um,
Very
so
therapeutic.
grateful, so yeah, there is a therapeutic component to it. We don't want to lead it with being therapy for sure.
Mhm.
Um, but it's basically it's journaling. So it's like all the effects of journaling without having to build the journaling habit, which is staring at a blank page and stuff.
Well, I've noticed when we went back to just talk to my grandpa, because we have a very cool family history. It would take up the whole episode, and you'd be
Hmm.
like, "Oh, that's amazing." But when we got into it, I just remember constantly visiting him and asking him and recording him so I could go do my research. But even when we started getting into his life, he's like, like they just some people feel like their story isn't worth telling. There isn't
Hmm.
meaning in it, and I'm feeling like if they would get a hold of Autograph and have this conversation with Walter, they would realize that there's like gold nuggets in all of these stories, which that's definitely like part of the foundation of my show is
Hmm.
bringing people on and being like, your story does matter. It doesn't matter your net worth, what your job is, where you grew up, what you're doing. You have no idea who you could impact out there. But now you're taking it into a family element. And I like that you're like, hey, we should, preserve the old people really quick because, they're
We
going,
got time to figure out some stuff, like.
yeah, yeah. But I saw a quote where it said, and again, the trailer that you have on this, I'll probably put the link down below for everybody to watch because seriously, I've cried twice. But you said, my life matters to someone somewhere. And
Hmm.
that really just hits home because again, it goes back to kind of the insecurity where I think with the way that media is almost set up, we have so many experts and talking heads and this and that. And there is a tremendous percentage of people that because these things are so sensationalized in media, that they're like, well, my story doesn't matter. And I think that you're the bridge between that insecurity and that limit in their mind
Hmm.
of your story does matter. And even circling back to when you use the reference of, oh, I was getting ready to move to New York. I wish that I could talk to my grandma a minute. Like maybe she has a story about it. I think that's really powerful just because you have no idea where each of these moments in your life are going to take you. Like, for instance,
Hmm.
my grandma was going to be a Catholic nun and take her vows. And she fell in love with my grandpa. And if
Wow.
decided to take her vows, we wouldn't even be here right now. So, like, I pictured that was my example in my head where I was like, "Grandma, what was it like to meet my grandpa and, kind of leave this institution and go off and marry him and have 6 kids and, like, so many other grandkids?" Like, yes, I've had that story in person, but
Hmm.
able to revisit it over and over and over, truly, again, golden retrievering you, just genius. You made me think of so many things that I've already spoke to my grandma about, but being able to hear it in her voice again, I think would be so cool, and I love that you're offering that to people.
I'm so glad to hear. And to me, it's like, we don't have the habit of even asking ourselves like, oh, I wish I could ask, this person who's no longer here anymore, this question because it's never been possible, right? And there's also a lot of stuff we don't know about the person, or maybe about our parents and grandparents, we know a good amount. But for like our second cousins, like
Mhm.
it's a bit more of a stretch. And so what I think I'm excited about is like you in the process of telling your own story, we can surface all of the stories from your tribe that would help you in making the best decision going forward. So you may find out stuff about your family by talking to Walter. Like, oh, like, yeah, Uncle Bobby was spent 2 years in, I don't know, like the Philippines doing something, and you're like, what? Like, I never knew that. Um,
Oh, yes. You're bringing up so many stories in my head right now of just some quarter flips that I've had, because you know them as, like, this aunt, this uncle, this great person, second cousin, whatever, and you obviously have a version of them in your mind. Then you're sitting at Thanksgiving one day, and they're like, "Remember that one time you were in World War II?" And you're like,
yeah.
"What? You in the army?" Like, you
Yeah.
see it. So it is a great way to, like, meet other people and really, like, bridge the family back together.
Hmm. And shared stories, like like there are all these things that are so informative of our identities. Like, oh, the Moors do things this way. The Sibley's do things this way,
Mhm.
and it may not be like the rule of law. This is how we do things, but like, that's how it's always been done. And so like that's the world that you grow up in, and even when engaging with like your significant other or things like that, being able to share the family lore and mythology, I think, is so important and just makes communication a lot easier. Um,
Or
and the
even
idea of
have mythology in your family, because some people just
total,
walk not even knowing anything. They're just like, "Ah, nothing cool really happened to us," and then you start digging into it, and maybe you found out that your last name has been altered over time. Because when our family immigrated years and years and years ago, we were fur traders. 3 brothers came
mm,
over, Jonathan, Christian, and Valentine, and
mm,
Jonathan was the main fur trader, and he had a name I can't even think of now, but our last name, like, was altered over.
mm,
So even when you're going back through your genealogy, I'm like, "Why am I looking at Herbster when we're supposed to be
mm.
looking at Harper?" And that's just my mother's side of the family. I didn't even get into my father's side of the family because that stuff makes no sense to me when you try to go through it. I mean, really doesn't. But I think what I've seen when I'm looking through the trailer is it makes you want to tell your story more and see that there's value in it. It connects you more to your family. And just like finding the gold nuggets, not only in their personal stories, but also going all the way back to ancestors that you can just feel more connected to through this platform as well.
Totally. And I mean, I think that something you said just got me spinning. That was like, I don't think there's anything cool with my family that a lot of people think, like, oh, my family is just normal. Like, there's nothing. You made it. You are here. Like
Yeah.
there's like an unbroken chain of survival that took like 14 billion years of cells figuring out how to organize themselves and evolving and figuring out, oh my gosh, now I have to deal with politics and now I have to deal with war and now I have to deal with famine. And through
Mhm.
it all, like, an unbroken chain of love and willingness to go on just like gets us to where we are. And there's no way you get 14 billion years of keeping going and no lessons there. No like life-altering lessons there.
Mhm.
Um, and everybody has mythology, like, but I agree that not everybody may feel that way.
Mhm.
We all have like an image of where we sit in our family, like our relationship to our parents, our relationship to our siblings, our relationship to our cousins and grandparents. The way, like how do you treat your grandparents? Do you say sir or ma'am or like I don't know, like some place in like Chile, for instance, like they say use sir for like your parents, and I'm like, and that just psychologically affects how you see the world and being able to engage with that. But imagine like what that was like 3 or 4 generations back, and the effort that they had to put in, and the discomfort, to put it mildly, that they had to overcome so that we could have the life that we have today. That is, um, the most abundant life that humanity has ever experienced. Um, is crazy, and like I think like one of our core values in the company is gratitude. The gratitude that we can work on this, gratitude that we are here, gratitude that we can bring joy into the world, and just gratitude that like like there's this baton that's been passed that
Mhm.
we get to carry. And so yeah, no, I hear you. I mean, like I'm so happy you're so excited. This makes me giggle.
Yes, you're a very passionate CEO, and I have a tree branch that I was just thinking of when you were saying that. Was the field of epigenetics is finally coming to the forefront of a lot of research. So
Hmm.
there are like good things and bad things, traumas and highlighted wonderful moments that have been passed down to us from people we don't even know. We
Hmm.
never even experienced their lifetime.
Hmm.
So I was thinking about how this could tie into helping people understand their generational trauma just from
Oh
interviewing
yeah,
parents as well. Like,
a
especially
hundred percent.
a lot of the immigration stories that you'll hear about people, whether it goes however far back, but they have the stories of their parents and their grandparents and their siblings and all of that. And I think how it could add like a healing modality aspect to it for yourself to, maybe add to the chain or break a few things on the chain that just don't need to continue in the lineage as well.
100%. 100%. I mean, just by like putting the story out there or just like externalizing it, then it's not in you anymore and it's not a part of you in the way that you think. Now
Mhm.
you can engage with it and you realize, oh wait, of course, this person was the youngest sibling and they got beat, and like like, and you just see you see the through line quite perfectly. Um and yeah, and I agree. I think that we could do a lot of healing by just bringing awareness to, I mean, all we really are is a set of stories. Like I can't tell apart the difference between who I think I am and the story I tell myself. And by, getting like edit access to that story, I can actually just change how I engage with the world. Um, yeah, so that's definitely something that we think about. And there's a very not challenging, but like interesting problem of how do you make it elegant and subtle so that it's not like like, hey, everybody's dirty laundry all over the place, right? It's more like,
Yeah.
because you also don't want to create like conflict unnecessarily, and so like how do you, although some of these things are conflict generating by nature, right?
Mhm.
um and so, how do you do that is an interesting product design challenge that we're very excited to tackle. Um, Especially, for
Yeah.
example, like one of the things that we're building now is, so it's not what we do is like as you talk to Walter, Walter will extract the different pages in your library. So this will be like the people in your life, the places in your life, the stories, the events, the recipes, what have you. Um, and it's almost like a Wikipedia for your life. And so it's like the encyclopedia of the life of Cheyenne. And what we're building now is not just like individual libraries, but shared libraries. So that we can have, like if, let's say the family goes on a trip and everybody can share their perspective on the trip. And, like, oh, there was this funny story where one family member fell into the pool or something like that. And you can capture it from all perspectives. Like, oh, grandma was like cooking while she saw Michael fall into the pool. And all of a sudden you can actually have, well, for shared experiences, like you could kind of see how it's like everybody's complementing perspectives. But
Mhm.
for more difficult life things, you could see how like sometimes the perspectives are contrasting, right? You know, this thing happens and some people fall on one side of it, some people fall on another side of it. And so how do we create these tools so that people can engage with these things, but also don't feel conflict toward necessarily someone having a different view? Because I mean, families disagree on stuff all the time. And I think just as we record everything that we agree on, we should record the stuff that we disagree on so that we know how to navigate each other, right? The classic like Thanksgiving conversation where it's like, oh, everybody's talking about over each other, about what issue, pick whatever issue you want, right? What if that could be a little bit better, you know?
What a great way to think about it, even getting down to the individual perspective on a same experience. Because by the end of it, usually when you're telling a story, you are just telling or retelling one person's perspective that they've told you over and over. So that is even cooler than what I originally thought this concept was. How wonderful. Okay, let's get into you. Tell me a little bit about your background. I want to hear about your time when you got some big titles over here, bud. You were a former software engineer at Google. You studied symbolic systems at Stanford, blending computer science with a passion for understanding the human story. So I can recap those anytime. I don't want you to blurt them all out at once, but talk
Mhm.
to me a little bit about your upbringing and how you really got into the work that you're doing now.
Sure. I grew up in Paraguay of all places. Like Paraguay is as remote as you can imagine. I love Paraguay. I think of it as the Shire, like for Lord of the Rings people, it's like the Shire of the
Oh,
world.
lovely. Yes,
Uh-huh.
Lord of the Rings fan. I know exactly what you're talking about.
So very similar energy, you know, like it's a lot of close-knit tight connections. Like nobody ever leaves, and so you have like three or four generations all staggered within like I don't know, like 20 block radius. And so you have a lot of family events, you know, like you have a lot of you know, like weddings and graduations and things like that. And your second cousins are basically your cousins, and your cousins are basically your siblings, and so on. And it was great. I mean, like I grew up in Paraguay, but with a very weird exception that my parents were both tech founders. And so they were both very, or they are both very entrepreneurial, both computer scientists. They own the family business together. My mom's the CEO, my dad's the CTO. So that was already very strange. Like I didn't realize how strange it was, but the more time goes on, the more I'm like, that was very unique. And I saw them, you know, try and try and try different kinds of software things, you know, until they found success building out like SMS infrastructure for the telcos of Latin America and Africa. And, you know, that changed our whole outlook. You know, like all of a sudden, you know, we were thinking global. And it's not, it's extremely rare. I mean, I think it's the only case of international expansion from a tech company in Paraguay. Um, and so it was a very unique situation that we were in, thinking global. Like, I applied to school in the US because my parents, you know, like always held me to a very high standard and getting good grades in high school. And I was like, I'm going to be a good boy. And so I got good grades. And eventually, I called their bluff and I applied to school in the US. And by some miracle, I was accepted into Stanford, and Stanford changed my life. You know, Stanford was is great. I discovered symbolic systems there. Symbolic systems is basically the tagline for it is minds and machines. So it's about 50% computer science, and the rest is split between philosophy, psychology, and linguistics. And you know, being exposed to a tech-heavy entrepreneurial home, I always was interested in computer science, but I also was really interested in the why, not just the how. And like, why are you doing this? Is this going to be a good thing? How is it going to affect people? How is our own productivity going to improve? Is it going to be in the right way? Um, and I always loved sci-fi, so you know, I concentrated, like you could concentrate in a bunch of different options, and I chose artificial intelligence at the time because I was like, what is the coolest? It's the coolest thing, you know, like, because like, how can you reconstruct something without understanding it? And I've always been fascinated by the stuff underneath, you know,
Mhm.
and um, and I've always loved teaching, so I taught computer science at Stanford. and then turned that into a job at Google, where I was a software engineer for 4 years, doing anything from ads and click tracking all the way to an AI powered education app. And and then during the pandemic, my wife was doing med school in Chicago, and I was itching to build, other skill sets that weren't just software engineering. I love software engineering so much. It's like a perfect little sandbox where, you're responsible for everything that happens. But I also love people, and I love the world, and I love how ideas work, and like how does something go from one mind into the world? And so I joined the family company as it was like remotely from Chicago, as it was pivoting from the tech company to an investment office. And so that was a great chance to learn about, finance and how things get funded, and how to come up with a reasonable portfolio, and that kind of stuff. And like, and it was also a chance to have all these big conversations about family and values, and how do we preserve our culture, and like how do we stick together in the context in which me and my sisters live abroad. Let's say, like my parents are in Paraguay, but we all live somewhere else. Um, and about 2 years later, my parents are the ultimate founders. They would say things like, you have to think like a founder and act like a founder and like get your founder instincts. And I was like, well, I don't know that I can simulate this without being a founder. And so once Jordan, my wife, got done with med school and her residency matched to UC San Francisco, we moved back to the Bay. And I realized, oh wow, okay, I think I need to just pull the trigger on this. I need to write myself into a corner to come up with an idea. At the time, ChatGPT had just come out, and so I say, okay, let's do this. And I take some time off to figure out what my next thing was going to be. I gave myself 3 months, and I couldn't find what the thing was, because this was like the bloodbath of AI times, where OpenAI was killing all these startups because everything was still so new. And then so I wanted to be smart about what idea to start, not if it's an idea that, like was kind of in the space of things that we normally do, then a big company with a distribution advantage would have uh insurmountable advantage. And so like, okay, it needs to be a new thing. Um, and in trying to find that thing, I was like, okay, the only thing that really isn't going to change in AI, everything's going to change. The only thing that isn't going to change is the need for more and better data. And so, what is the data that we need to produce at scale so that the next generation of AI, that's going to be like the most intelligent and like, central technology of the future, is kinder, more heroic, that allows us to become the versions of ourselves that we want to be, not the versions of ourselves that we would become by default if we keep training AI with like, where do our eyeballs go when we see an ad kind of stuff. Um, and so then I didn't have the answer quite then, but I was like, okay, maybe I should write a book about this stuff. And maybe this book should be this thing that goes into AI training so that it upgrades its brain to be a bit kinder, and or at least to help us find ways to make meaning together. Because that was my fear a couple of years ago, that like our ability to make shared meaning was falling apart. Like we couldn't use the same words, and we couldn't use um everything was so polarized and incendiary that I was really worried that we were drifting, and with AI, that drift would become too much. So anyway, I wrote a sci-fi novel that ended up becoming my life story told in a fantastical way. But it forced me to get all my philosophy in order. It forced me to like really think about who I am and like my identity, and like, wait a minute, I am just a story, and I am the author of this story, but I'm also the protagonist. And then I remember thinking, oh my goodness, like this like an unbelievable sense of relief, of almost existential relief, because I had told my piece, like I had transmuted myself into a new medium. And I was like, my goodness, I wish everybody could go through this exercise. um and but then I was like, oh my gosh, but I took like 6 months to write a book, and that is like impossible for most people to do. It's hard enough for people to like take time to read the book, imagine like take time enough to write it.
Mhm.
And in so after I was done with the book, I was like, okay, like, but being an author in the 21st century requires multimedia. So it's not just a book, it's a podcast and events and things like that. So I started a podcast to talk about the ideas in the book. And a lot of it is just really what is our humanity in the age of AI? What does it mean for the creative self? What does it mean for jobs? What does it mean for um, the economy and politics and like the military and art and science and not always centered around AI, but like how does AI inform cognitive science? How does cognitive science inform philosophy and all these kind of things? And I love the format. I love like sharing in conversation and just exploring how are you the person that you are and like why are you interested in the stuff that you're interested in. And I remember thinking, like, I wish I could interview everybody on Earth. And in part of that, part of that journey, I was like, well, I also should interview my grandma. My grandma has a crazy life story. Like, I'm sure, like most grandmas have crazy life stories, but her dad was an MI6 agent. They fled Europe during the war. They somehow ended up in Paraguay, of all places. They communicated over secret messages, and all that stuff is like lore, but it's never been documented anywhere. And so we set a time, and before our interview, she had a stroke that left her paralyzed for the last 18 months of her life. And that was the trigger that was like, wait a minute, so how do I connect all the things? Oh, wait a minute. So what if I could interview everybody on Earth? And that exercise makes generates the story that allows people to feel like, oh, I'm a part of history, I'm a part of something bigger. Um, that connects my entrepreneurial background and my Stanford, academic background with my engineering chops at Google, and it just appeared out of somewhere, and then it was a whole thing to try to wait a minute. Does this make sense? Is it not too creepy? Is it weird? And like you just seeing the reaction from people when the idea was presented, like, the I have a voicemail that I hold on to, or like, oh my gosh, I wish I had this for my dad, or oh my gosh, like, can we get this for my grandpa now? Because he's sick, or things like that. And the more personal the connection and the more intimate the request, the more I realize, oh my gosh, there's something here. And that's the story.
Mhm. I love this story. I have so many things to pull apart, but you just reminded me of something. Years ago, I found a notebook that I gave my grandpa, and it was a notebook that he was supposed to write in his leisure, and it asked him questions.
Mm,
And he really didn't feel like writing in it that much. So he did
mhm,
sometimes he would forget about it, he would go back and forth. I would go visit, and my grandma would say, "You need to remind your grandpa to, like, write in his notebook the stories." So, I like this updated version where you don't have to sit and, like, think and write. It just kinda feels like a phone call almost with a friend just asking you questions. And I'm sure there's so many times he would just sit there with, like, he does the twiddling the thumbs thing
mm,
when he thinks, so he'd be like, "Oh gosh, that was a long time ago." Because my
mm.
grandpa's so old now, he's like, "If I'd have known I was gonna live this long, I'd have taken better care of myself." He's
Oh
on, like, yeah, he's like, I'm on my 3rd pacemaker." He's had, like, open heart surgery probably 11 years ago, and even then, he was like, "Lord, take me." And
my God.
he's just got some really, really good stories, but then when you think of, like, the lore of the family history and not having it documented the way that it should, we had a time in our history where it was that, where we grew up with this. It felt like a fable. You're like, "No way, that's
Mm,
our family." And then we started researching and going into our genealogy. We actually found a bunch of our family members that are a part of, like, a society that
mm,
shares their genealogy, and they get together to not only, like, share stories, but prove. And then I even have a distant cousin that wrote a book about the whole story. It's called The Little Brown Suitcase, very distant cousin.
mm,
Um, and basically, um, to keep the story short, there was a real will and a different will that was changed, and somebody found the real will after everything had been split up, and this investigation ensued, and it was taken through the courts to prove whose family fortune was who and whose where it goes, and by the end of it, they proved that the fortune was our family's, but the only reason they didn't hand over the insane estate was because the statute of limitations had run out on the will. and the claim. So we have
No.
yes, we have, like, the newspaper articles, we have records all the way back from when, like, Jonathan was a fur trader coming over and, like, who he trained. So, if you know anything about John Jacob Astor, the richest man who died on the Titanic,
Hmm.
that is our family fortune. That was yeah. And there's
Oh
already
my
books about
gosh.
it. I'm like, "I gotta write a book about this," but there's so many about it, and there's some from their perspective where it talks about, like, that family, but our Jonathan had actually written a contract to hand the fur trading business over to John Jacob Astor for 100 years, and after 100 years, any descendants that could prove that they were of Jonathan, Valentine, or Christopher's lineage, the the whole estate would be returned back to our bloodline, and that never happened. And then something with the will happened.
Ugh.
Astor died on the Titanic. Whole bunch of crazy things happened in
Oh
between.
my gosh. That
Like,
is
voice of his hearsay.
juicy, juicy, juicy stuff.
Oh, yeah, we had family members, like, disappear, like, going, like, overseas, and this is the lore part of it. They went overseas to testify, and then they went to their hotel room the next day to get them, and they were gone, and, like, there were just their shoes left in a hotel room. And that's, like, generations back that we've heard, but it is very juicy, and if you look
Oh
at
my
the
gosh.
state today of, like, everything they own all over the world, I should be a bougie, bougie person right now, but I am so far from it, and, I mean, by the grace of God, it's probably the best, but yeah, like, when you think of if you looked at my family or our upbringing and just how humble and into nature and country and just small
Mm,
town love and living, you would never think that that would be our family history, that all
mm,
of this, like, James Bond type stuff kinda happened all the way back then. But even
mhm.
you're like, "My grandma's dad was an MI6, I wonder how they wound up in Paraguay." I'm like, "Well, if it's remote, that would make sense. That's where people usually go to escape stuff." But how would you have known that your family had ties that deep? That's an incredible story as well. So these are the type of stories that not only, like, can be captured, but you can have grandchildren like us that are willing to do that investigative work to really report it not only for ourselves and our findings, but give it to the next generations as well.
Hmm. And it's not just like the stories that can be captured. I think what I think is there's stories that otherwise would be forgotten.
Yeah.
Like they would just forget that this thing happened. Um, and I don't know. You don't have to peel too deep into the onion to find all kinds of fascinating things. Um. So yeah, that is crazy. But I love that you're already like family documentarian, energy.
Oh,
Um,
yeah. I mean, my mom and my sister did a tremendous amount of work, but so did my grandpa's mother, and we inherited all
mm,
of her research and then got to
mm,
go off of that. So yeah, it's quite the lure for sure, and to have, like, so many other, like, very, very distant relatives be in on it, and, like, I remember when we were younger, we met up with these I'm just gonna keep saying very distant cousins because that's the best way I could do it, and they brought their portfolios and their books, and they're like, "Here's all our research," and we gave them our research, and they're like, "We meet on Wednesdays," it was kinda something had, like, this handheld scanner to scan all of the things and then go print them off later. That was in, like, my early 20s too, so I've always been, like, really dedicated to the story, but I also think, like you, that made me wonder about everybody else, where I'm like, everybody
mm,
really does have a story, I just don't think they realize they have a story, maybe they need to be provoked in a positive manner to have that introspection, and even
mhm,
with your book, because I mean, not that I'm writing a sci-fi novel, but I am writing a nonfiction, and there are a lot
mm.
of parts about my life, my mom's life, my grandparents' life, all of that, and sitting down and writing that is very put a mirror in front of your face, and you're right,
Oh
"Oh,
yeah.
I'm the hero, I'm the villain, I'm this,
Yeah.
I'm that, they're that." Like, not everybody has a halo around them, but it's such a great way to introspect and honestly tell the truth and how I didn't even know I was carrying that around. I had no idea that was inside of me or I felt that way. I think more people should do it because it can just inspire you to honestly live like a lighter life in a sense. Like, whew, let me get that on my chest. Let me get that out of my epigenetics too. I don't want to
Yeah.
I don't want to pass that down to anybody. I want to stop that habit. So there's so many ways that this can like move into your life. And I think not only your transition from like your upbringing with your tech parents, I think is really cool, holding you to a high standard and you even being like, I'm going to be the big boy. But then coming over to the US, going into Stanford, the love that your parents taught you, transcending you through yours, but then even your creative outlet. Because
Mm,
honestly, sometimes when I'm going to talk to somebody who's very into anything tech, I do
mm,
have a stereotype where I'm like, they're going to be very introverted. Like, I'm gonna have
mhm,
to pull a lot out of them. I can
mhm,
act like a golden retriever sometimes when I meet people, as you've seen, like, go you.
mhm,
Um, but you even have these artistic mediums that you've allowed to not only introspect, but heal yourself and get your story out. But then you also took your love of sci-fi and put it into it as well. But I'm really interested about like what type of guests do you have on your podcast
mm.
and what like I know you talked a little bit, but what inspired you most about not only doing the podcast, but bringing on certain guests in a rabbit hole form?
Um, I think that, well, one little note that you said got me thinking, when you write, I don't think you realize, but you are epigenetically reprogramming yourself. And so I was fascinated by this idea. Like, what if we could just like, I mean, how can you actually, this is a tree branch. I was part of a study at Stanford. I was part of a study at Stanford where essentially it was like a genetics, the counseling study, where effectively they told me that I had a gene that would make me obese. And, like I came in 2 weeks later and they, like they measured my, like I took drank a protein shake and they would measure my blood, like some hormone called ghrelin in my blood. And the second time after they told me I had this gene, the ghrelin behaved like I had this gene. And so I was just told, hey, you have this gene. And my body behaved like I had that gene. And then after the experiment, after I gained something like 10 pounds in 2 weeks, they told me, no, just kidding. This is an experiment to see how you would behave if you're told something, and so I was like, what? That kind of, there's way more to unpack from this thing. Um, and so I was thinking, well, like, what is this epigenetic? How can you like, essentially edit your epigenetic profile? And and so I was fascinated by this idea of like, wait a minute, is this a linguistic construct? Is this a is it through language? Is language doing the thing, or is it the brain? But where in the brain? But what part of like how where is the in the loop that goes from like something you believe going into reality versus like reality becoming something you believe? Um, and that was like the big exercise when writing the book is like, wait a minute, sci-fi and reality are one and the same. Like AI is happening. You just think about what happens with AI in genetics or what happens with, like all this thing converges like really quickly into really weird places. Um, and so the first set of guests were all like folks in academia, mostly like Stanford professors or Harvard professors of different, like of psychology, of AI, of cognitive science, of philosophy, trying to paint this picture of like, wait a minute, how do all of these things inform what is happening now and what can we produce out of it? And and then I was also like, okay, but like there are all these themes in the book around how do you make the right decision under uncertainty, so like bring in like a moral philosophy person, or um why is it that fiction moves us more than like the law? You read the law and it's dry and boring, but fiction, like can teach you a lesson more powerful than a lot of the law, And so what's that about? And so like bringing in legal folks and bringing in like storytellers and sci-fi authors, and so it just became this like hodgepodge, a group of folks that I like to geek out about, random stuff, physics, and that's basically it. I was very much just trying to whet my appetite and being like, okay, what is the complement to this book that I wrote that informs the worldview of the book, so that when people read the book and they're like, oh, these conversations are effectively the footnotes to the book.
We have so much in common with our podcast, and I mean, I already knew that with you as a guest and bringing on you about autograph, but then how you take like things that you're interested in or learning about in your life and you're inspired and it's almost like the guest shows up automatically. And I've had that
Almost.
recently. Almost, yes. I've had that recently with Joe Rogan just brought on Greg Braden on his podcast. They did almost a 3-hour episode, and Greg Braden is one of my favorite people to listen to talk to. He's went all over the world, studied, wrote books. He says things that really freak people out because their minds are just not as open as his or researched or whatever. But he talks about, the evolution of humans, how at first we were, like they were like, oh, we all evolved from Neanderthals. And then now the research shows that we were next to them. And then they go down to the DNA of it and they're talking about a DNA splice over 200
Oh.
years ago, right? It's like human chromosome 2 or something.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I just find that so fascinating. And I definitely have to like observe and watch because I don't wanna say I'm just not up on all of the terminology. It really takes me a minute, but I do find that research fascinating. So then it inspired me to go to one of his other talks that I was already working on an episode with Eureka, my AI assistant, about his breakdown of the Gospel of Thomas and
Mm.
how prayer and energy works together, and it talks about the right way to pray because 'cause there's been an altered version of these books of how people are praying now and how they used to pray in way back when. So
Mm.
they bring the spiritual aspect of it, the religious aspect, the changing of the doctrine over time, but also like the metaphysics and almost the quantum physics in it, which that's something that I could listen to every day because anything about quantum anything, which felt sci-fi long ago when I heard about it, but now there's so many things, whether it's in movies or just theories that are being proven as reality, and it's just blowing my mind. So I can imagine you sitting on your podcast, hearing these people and just being like nerding out over physics. And I was like, I get it, man. I get it. Like, it's so exciting to not only get your story out there, but other people's perspectives and story and research and not necessarily sell it as like the truth, right? They're like, this is what I found. This is the absolute truth. It's like, check this out. Keep an open
Yeah.
mind. Do your own research. I hope it inspires you in some way, shape, or form. But look what I found. Isn't this cool? And then hoping it just like is passed on to the next person. And hopefully, it helps along the path in some way, shape, or form. Like you said, you don't know who is out there that's going to pick up your book, your podcast, your story, your TikTok, your Instagram post. It doesn't matter. And that's the positive side of the internet and social media that I find.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. And I do think, you know, we need to hold on to the positive. Um, but no, I mean, so many nuggets there about the origins of humanity that we could get into that is so much fun. I love
I'm
chatting
reading
about
you
that
because
stuff.
I know your title is
Uh-huh.
cool. I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
"Have you heard
cool.
about this?" Because I don't know
Yeah.
if
Are you
that's
familiar with the word Anunnaki? You know?
yes, I am fascinated by the Emerald tablets, and again, I'm
Uh-huh.
fascinated by all of it, but at the same time, like, I'm like the inheritor of everything sentimental in our family's lives.
Mm,
So, like, at my grandma's funeral, we were able to take the little statues off of her casket. Cheyenne gets one. I have,
mm,
some things from my grandpa. One of the last couple visits I had with my grandma for like 2 years, every time I went to my grandma's, she's trying to give me stuff.
mm, mhm.
Well, make sure it gets in your hands. And I was gifted the family Bible, which is this huge
Mm.
old Catholic Bible. It has our family tree in it and it has like people's marriage license in it. It's so old.
Wow.
Like, not only do I want the digital memory of them, like what you're offering people, but also like I want to preserve like the physical legacy
Mm,
of our
mhm.
family and to be able to pass it on.
Actually,
So,
that gets me thinking there's something we could probably do to help store some of that stuff, you know? A lot of people have like archives,
yeah,
but it's like it takes space, it takes time, you know, like so maybe there's something there we could do. Like
I hope I
be a
haven't
library, an actual library, you know?
more. Yeah, well, even like pictures, right? I was reading a
Hmm.
book.
Oh yeah, we scan it, you know?
Yeah, the lady did so good writing the book, but also after she would talk to you about the artifact that they found, you would flip the page over because the whole time you're reading it, you're trying to picture it in your mind. And then you flip it over and you're like, yes, it's the picture. Ah, and you have it there. And I know for some, like, not everybody's going to be able to share like a family heirloom, but
Hmm.
again, generations down the line, you don't know where things are going. And who
Hmm.
knows, maybe we could inspire like many generations of like Indiana Jones type characters to go out and find the artifacts of their family. Because there is
Hmm.
a preservation I think we need, not just in humanity, but also in like a family stance as well, keeping your culture alive. Like I was one of three kids. My siblings were baptized Catholic and I was not. So I, right? Ooh. So I
Are you
took
the
it,
youngest?
yeah, I am.
Hmm.
I took it as a sign as, oh my gosh, I get to go out and explore whatever I want and I get to choose whatever I want. And that's probably, where I am now with still exploring all of the things,
Hmm.
but it's so amazing that you're taking this technology and it's good to like change with the times because you do wonder like how long this Bible can actually last with just the way the papers are made. But now I have the story of how it came to me and who it came from. So I could honestly just talk to you all day about all of this. I'm definitely going to get more into your podcast.
I'm
And
excited. Yeah, any notes are more than welcome, you know.
oh, yeah, well, I'm not the best at constructive criticism because I'm too busy complimenting people. I believe that I was put on the earth to just really like, you know, prep people like
Hype people up.
yeah, I'm like, the world is gonna beat you down. I am not the
Hmm.
one to do it. And I take such pride in messing up on my show, in my writing, in my videos, just to remain human and away from the copy cut paste influencer talking head aspect. So when people get so hard on themselves like I do, and that imposter syndrome comes in, I'm just like, I have to press publish because there's people out there that are refusing to press publish because they don't have someone out there messing up or
Hmm.
doing a fact check or something like that. So, yeah, I mean, I'll be happy to probably send you notes and be like, okay, now I have to thank you for these 7 rabbit holes. It's not like I don't have enough of my own. But as far as like, constructive criticisms, you're probably not going to hear that from me. You're probably just see a cheerleader on your email because again, that's what I think I was put on earth for is just to be like, no, this is in you. Bring it out. Like, let's clear the muck out. Let's do this. I'm just
I love that.
like I said, I'm a golden retriever. So one last question before we hop off here. What is your future hope or future goal to add on to, or what do you want Autograph to be in the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years? Even if you've
Hmm.
had the thought of like, what is Autograph going to be after I'm gone?
Um, I I mean, I hope Walter becomes humanity's like witness, you know. I think that like I'm really excited about the role that he can play in that similar to what you said in reminding people of the beauty in their lives.
Mhm.
Um but you know, we become the Library of Alexandria, I suppose, you know, like or it's very
Yeah.
hard to compare it to anything because it's so voice driven that it's like the halls of our ancestors and everybody who's living too that has like lighter weight stuff to share. Um, but the idea being that like how can you access all of humanity's, you know, the stuff that is in humanity's brains that has never been published before, um, to understand ourselves better. You know, I think things are going to change so much in the next 20 years.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's all going to be VR stuff and injected into our brains, and we're going to be tuning in and out of realities. And um, so I think that this is the library that we build to find our way back home when we explore all of the possibilities of the neuro metaverse, you know? Um, and it's the kind of stuff that you know, like if you send a robot to colonize a planet, this is the stuff that you would send, you know, like all of the voices of everybody who came before. Um, and it just opens up all these kind of really weird questions, you know, like, and, you know, when we have robots, can we just download someone's story into the robot and they, you know,
Yeah.
act like the robot? So does that mean that we get to go to Mars, you know? And it doesn't matter how long into the future, you know, like we could go see the stars. And the same thing that thinks that is you will think it's you too, you know, when it sees the stars. and it will figure out how to stitch together these two memories. Um, so
Are
I
you
don't know.
talking
I'm excited.
sorry
What's
to
that?
interrupt. Are you talking about like transferring consciousness when you talk about that?
Not necessarily, right? Like I don't even know what it is, but let's say like we create an autograph of Cheyenne that is good enough that you trust it with your signature, right? And it thinks that it is you. It knows that it's a digital version of you, but it thinks it's you.
Mhm.
And in the future, there will be robots, and you could probably, like download that essence into the robot, and then that robot would be Robot Cheyenne, and it would think it is right, and then
Yeah,
to get it's almost like this cloning thing, like like I don't know, it gets into this really weird
that
place, but.
feels sci-fi right now, but you're right. There actually could be a future that exists like that.
This is like not that far. It's like within the next 5 years, and then it gets crazier and crazier and crazier. So I like the thing that what I hope autograph becomes is a symbol for home. That the human home where we can remember who we are and we can always find our way to our roots in a world that has two, at least two, if not many more, but like very different outcomes. Like there's the world in which we get everything that we want, and we, go through the stars. And then there's the world that we eat each other up. And that is, and in case of this, despair and turmoil and war, then we'll also want to remember where we come from and things like that. So what I want autograph is to be a symbol for hope and security and value. And whatever else sci-fi future happens is, it's science fiction as of now, but within the next couple of years, it'll be true.
Bravo. Bravo. Yes. I have had a tremendous amount of fun and gratitude talking with you today. And
Me too.
yes, you are quite the conversationalist for a tech guy. I got to be honest. I was like, oh, no, not a, what do I do with
The
introverts? Shake the computer. Wake up.
I
Give
know
me.
that's so funny. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm the exception that proves the rule, I guess.
Yes, very true. Very true. Well, I appreciate you coming on today and sharing your story, your legacy, and all of the work that you do. And my biggest thing I'd probably want you to know is if you ever want to come back here, add on to the story, tell us about your book, any add-ons that you have, or hey, even if you start another company, like please keep us up to date with your story. I think you are definitely one of a kind, but extremely fascinating with the mediums that you choose to explore your human experience with.
Thank you, Cheyenne. I'll be back. I'm excited to.
Yay, wonderful. Well, friends, go ahead and scroll down to those show notes right now so you can check out that beautiful trailer about Autograph AI that made me cry, and I bet will make you cry. But also, if you want to go and add your memories and talk to Walter, head on over and we'll see you on the next episode. Love you guys.